Welcome to our countdown of the 10 most legendary gunslingers of the Wild West. These are the men whose names have become synonymous with the rugged and lawless frontier. They lived by their own code, a code forged in the heat of the midday sun and the chill of a midnight showdown. Some were outlaws, some were lawmen, and some walked a line so fine between the two it was hard to tell which side they were even on. But one thing's for sure, they all knew how to handle a six-shooter. Get ready because we're about to saddle up and ride back in time to meet the men who made the Wild West so wild. He was just a kid, really. A young man barely old enough to shave when he found himself on the wrong side of the law, on the run, a price on his head. Born Henry McCarty, he became known as William Bonney, but history remembers him as Billy the Kid. He came from a hard life, orphaned young, forced to fend for himself in a world that offered little mercy. They say he killed 21 men, one for every year of his life. That number's probably exaggerated, but the legend of his quick draw and cold nerve spread like wildfire through the territories. He ran with cattle rustlers and outlaws, tangled with lawmen and regulators, always one step ahead of the hangman's noose. In the end, it was his old friend, Sheriff Pat Garrett, who caught up with him. Billy the Kid, the boy outlaw, died the way he lived, young, defiant, and with a gun in his hand. Jesse James. The name itself conjures up images of daring train robberies, lightning-fast gunfights, and a band of brothers bound by loyalty and blood. He was born into a nation divided, fighting for the Confederacy in the Civil War before he was old enough to vote. After the war, he and his brother Frank turned their skills against a different enemy, the banks and railroads they saw as symbols of Northern oppression. To some, he was a common criminal, a thief who preyed on the innocent. But to others, he was a folk hero, a modern-day Robin Hood who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. The legend of Jesse James grew with every daring raid, every narrow escape. He became a symbol of resistance, a thorn in the side of the establishment. But even legends can die. Betrayed by one of his own gang, Jesse James met his end with a bullet in the back. He was just 34 years old. Wyatt Earp. He wasn't a lawman for most of his life. He drifted from town to town trying his hand at gambling, mining, even buffalo hunting. But fate, it seems, had other plans for Wyatt Earp. He and his brothers ended up in Tombstone, Arizona, a boomtown crawling with cowboys, gamblers, and outlaws. It was there, in the dusty streets of Tombstone, that Wyatt Earp would make his name. The gunfight at the OK Corral, a 30-second exchange of gunfire that would become the stuff of legend, cemented his place in the pantheon of Western heroes. He went on to become a symbol of frontier justice, a man who stood tall against the forces of chaos and lawlessness. But Wyatt Earp was a complex character, a man who lived in the shadows between right and wrong. He was known to be a ruthless gambler, and some whispered he wasn't above bending the law himself. Love him or hate him, there's no denying the impact Wyatt Earp had on the shaping of the West. He was a man who lived by his own code. He died an old man, knowing his legend was secure. Doc Holliday. A dentist by trade, but a gambler, gunfighter, and loyal friend by choice. He was born John Henry Holliday into a respectable Southern family, but fate, it seemed, had a different path in store for him. Diagnosed with tuberculosis at a young age, he headed west, hoping the dry air would ease his suffering. It was there, in the saloons and gambling dens of the frontier, that Doc Holliday found his true calling. He was a skilled gambler, known for his icy nerves and even colder stare. But it was his skill with a gun, a skill he honed out of necessity, that made him a legend. He partnered with Wyatt Earp in Tombstone, becoming a key figure in the gunfight at the OK Corral. He was a man who knew he was living on borrowed time, and he faced every day with a quiet courage that commanded respect. Doc Holliday was more than just a gunfighter. He was a complex character, a man of contradictions. He was educated and refined, yet he chose to live a life of danger and violence. He died young, his body ravaged by tuberculosis, but his legend lived on. Doc Holliday, the gambler with a gun, became a symbol of the Wild West, unpredictable, dangerous, and utterly unforgettable. Wild Bill Hickok. The very name conjures up images of the Wild West. He was a scout, a lawman, a gambler, and a showman. Born James Butler Hickok, he embraced the life of the West, becoming a legend in his own time. He was known for his skill with a pistol, his piercing blue eyes, and his flowing mustache. He was a man of contradictions, a deadly gunfighter, who was also known for his kindness and generosity. He fought for both the Union and the Confederacy during the Civil War, served as a scout and spy for the Army, and even worked as a lawman in some of the roughest towns in the West. His reputation as a gunfighter followed him wherever he went, and he was involved in numerous gunfights, including the famous Dead Man's Hand incident where he was shot in the back while playing poker. Wild Bill Hickok was a true icon of the Wild West, a man who lived life on his own terms and died a legend. Butch Cassidy, the leader of the Wild Bunch, a gang of outlaws who terrorized banks and trains across the West. But unlike many of his contemporaries, Butch Cassidy wasn't known for his violence. Born Robert Leroy Parker, he adopted the alias Butch Cassidy and cultivated an image as a gentleman outlaw. He was known for his charisma, his intelligence, and his aversion to unnecessary bloodshed. He and his gang, which included the Sundance Kid, became notorious for their daring robberies and their ability to elude the law. They used their wits and their knowledge of the terrain to stay one step ahead of the posses that pursued them, but the walls were closing in on Butch and Sundance. The Pinkerton Detective Agency was hot on their trail, and the West was becoming a more dangerous place for outlaws. So they did what any sensible outlaw would do: they headed to South America. Their exploits continued there, but their story takes on an almost mythical quality. Did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid die in a blaze of glory in a Bolivian shootout? Or did they manage to escape and live out their days in anonymity? The truth, like so much else about the Wild West, remains shrouded in mystery. The Sundance Kid. His real name was Harry Alonzo Longabaugh, but everyone knew him by the name he earned robbing a bank in Sundance, Wyoming. He was a man of few words, preferring action to talk. His skill with a gun was legendary, and he was a loyal member of Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch. He was born in Pennsylvania, but like many young men of his time, he headed west seeking adventure and opportunity. He found both, but he also found a life of crime. The Sundance Kid was involved in some of the most daring train and bank robberies in history. He was a master of disguise and a crack shot, and he always seemed to be one step ahead of the law. He was a man of contradictions, a ruthless outlaw who was also known for his quiet demeanor and his loyalty to his friends. He was a shadow, a whisper of danger in a time and place where danger lurked around every corner. The Sundance Kid rode into legend alongside Butch Cassidy, their names forever linked in the annals of the Wild West. John Wesley Hardin. They called him the deadliest man alive. He was a killer, a gunfighter, a product of a violent time. He was born in Texas, the son of a Methodist preacher, but the cloth didn't fit young John Wesley. He claimed to have killed his first man at the age of 15, and the body count just kept rising from there. He tangled with lawmen and outlaws alike, always ready to draw his pistol at the slightest provocation. He was involved in numerous gunfights, and his reputation as a cold-blooded killer spread like wildfire. He spent time in prison, but even behind bars, his reputation preceded him. He was a man who seemed to thrive on violence, a man who lived and breathed the code of the gun. John Wesley Hardin's story is a dark chapter in the history of the West, a reminder that not all legends are heroes. He was a killer, plain and simple, a man consumed by his own demons. He died the way he lived, by the gun. Shot in the back by a lawman in an El Paso saloon, his legend lived on, a cautionary tale of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the Wild West. Bat Masterson. He was more than just a fancy dresser with a quick draw. He was a lawman, a gambler, a newspaperman, and a showman. Born Bartholomew Masterson, he earned the nickname Bat for his skill with a cane, which he used to subdue unruly patrons in the saloons he worked in. He was a man of contradictions, a tough lawman who was also known for his sense of style and his love of the finer things in life. He was friends with Wyatt Earp, fought in the Indian Wars, and even served as a sheriff in Dodge City, Kansas. But Bat Masterson was more than just a gunfighter. He was a complex character, a man who straddled the line between the Wild West and the burgeoning civilized world. He became a sports editor for a New York newspaper, befriended Theodore Roosevelt, and even became a boxing referee. Bat Masterson's story is a reminder that the West was a land of opportunity, where a man could reinvent himself and forge his own destiny. He was a true original, a man who lived a life as colorful as the vests he wore. He was the lawman who brought down Billy the Kid, but his story is so much more than that single act. Born Patrick Floyd Garrett, he was a buffalo hunter, a rancher, and a saloon keeper before he pinned on a badge. He was a man of few words, a quiet and determined individual who embodied the spirit of the frontier. His pursuit of Billy the Kid became legendary, a cat-and-mouse game that played out across the New Mexico territory. He finally caught up with the kid in Fort Sumner, shooting him down in a darkened room. But killing the kid didn't make Pat Garrett a hero. It weighed on him, haunted him. He continued to serve as a lawman, but his life took a downward turn. He was a man caught between two worlds, the Old West that was fading away and the New World that was struggling to be born. In the end, Pat Garrett met a violent end himself, shot down in an ambush, the circumstances of his death still debated to this day. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the Wild West. We've met the men who lived and died by the gun, who carved their names into the history books with every pull of the trigger. Their stories, though often shrouded in myth and legend, offer a glimpse into a bygone era, a time when the West was truly wild, a land of opportunity and danger in equal measure. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating historical content.